Artem had spent his whole life on the rails. The steel tracks had long become an extension of his own body. He could feel every tremor, every vibration, every metallic groan deep in his bones. He wasn't just an engineer, he was the guide of a giant living creature made of iron and steam. Through endless miles of frozen Siberian wilderness, they moved together, man and machine, through a world of snow, silence, and cold that never forgave mistakes. That January day began like any other. The sky was a pale, colorless haze, the sun just a weak smudge of light behind the clouds. The forest slept under heavy drifts of snow. Then, in the distance, on a straight stretch of track cutting through the white desert, Artem saw something that made his heart seize. They were standing right on the rails. A wall of fur and muscle, unmoving. A pack of wolves. He blinked, thinking it was a mirage brought on by exhaustion. But the fog of their breath in the freezing air told him this was no illusion. Since childhood, Artem had known one unbreakable law of the taiga: every living creature runs from the roar of a train. Even the bravest beasts flee the thunder of steel. But these didn't. They stood firm, shoulder to shoulder, their amber eyes locked on the locomotive's front glass. No snarling. No fear. No movement. Only calm, unwavering resolve. They weren't blocking the path in defiance. They were guarding it. A wave of unease ran through Artem. His instincts screamed at him to sound the horn, to scatter them. He pulled the lever. The train's horn tore through the stillness like a cannon blast, shaking snow from the branches. Yet the wolves didn't move. Not one. Something cold and ancient slid down his spine. They weren't standing there by chance. They were showing him something. Warning him. He slammed the emergency brake. Sparks burst from under the wheels as the train screamed against the rails. The massive body of steel shuddered, fought, and finally came to a trembling halt, just meters away from the pack. Artem leaned forward, staring through the windshield. Then, slowly, the wolves began to move. Not running, gliding. They stepped aside in perfect unison, forming a corridor down the tracks. And at the end of that corridor, lying motionless on the rails, was a man. Artem jumped from the cabin, snow swallowing his boots as he ran forward. The man was old, dressed in torn clothes, his face pale and cut by deep lines of fatigue. He tried to raise himself but had no strength left. "Grandfather," Artem whispered, kneeling beside him. The man lifted his head, and recognition flashed in his fading eyes. Semyon Petrovich. It was the old forester, the man who had lived alone in a cabin on the edge of the woods, who had taught Artem as a boy about animal tracks, the language of the wind, and the spirit of the taiga. And then Artem saw the horror. The old man's wrist was chained to the rail. The steel of the handcuffs had cut deep into his skin, the snow beneath was stained crimson. Cursing, Artem ran back to the cabin, grabbed a crowbar, and with a cry of rage and effort, tore the chain apart. He carried the weak, trembling man into the cabin, wrapped him in his coat, poured hot tea into his shaking hands. It took long minutes before the forester spoke. And when he did, his words froze the air. "They wanted me dead," he whispered. "Poachers. I've been in their way for years. They caught me and chained me here, said the train would do their work for them." He stopped, his voice barely audible. "I heard your horn, I thought that was it. I made my peace. Then they came." "Who?" The old man gave a faint smile. "My wolves. The same family I've watched all these years. They came out of the forest, surrounded me. I thought they would finish me off. But they didn't even look at me. They looked down the track. They waited. And then I understood, they were stopping the train. Making me visible." Artem sat in silence. He felt something shifting inside him, something breaking and reforming. The beasts he had been taught to fear, the predators that live by fang and instinct, had come to protect the man who once protected them. They couldn't break steel, but they could stand against it. They became a living barrier, a wordless cry for help, and that cry had been heard. Years passed. Semyon Petrovich recovered, and his story spread through the villages, becoming legend. But Artem was never the same again. Each time he drove through that section of the forest, he slowed down. He would peer into the dark pines, into the blue shadows beneath the snow-laden branches. Sometimes he thought he saw movement, grey shapes gliding silently between the trees. They never showed themselves. They didn't need to. They were there, always, standing watch. And every time, Artem felt the same quiet warmth rising inside him. A feeling beyond words, something between awe and gratitude. He understood then that in a world where human ties so easily break, there exists another bond, older, purer, unspoken. A bond of trust. Of loyalty. Of silent understanding. He realized that the truest messages don't need words. Sometimes they are spoken only through a gaze, proud, patient, and endlessly kind, from those we once, foolishly, called beasts. And now, as his train roared through the night and the endless white expanse of snow, Artem knew one thing for certain. Somewhere out there, beneath the frozen stars, the soul of the tiger still keeps its silent watch, wild, noble, and forever grateful.